are getting away, no one will stall the engine, and they all follow Alain Prost. His penultimate Grand Prix start, John.
Well, he's very keen to get away because, well, it's Ayrton Senna is the one that was slightly slow away, and there Gerhard Berger also slow, but managing not to lose really any position, so everything will be as per the grid. And all 24 cars now on this final parade lap as they filter through this first double right-hand corner. And back in 1990, after this Japanese Grand Prix, I asked Alain Prost from his point of view what happened, and he said, well, I went out to the left because I knew I could go through the first part of that right-hand corner flat out. And I said, well, why bother when Ayrton Senna you knew was going to come down the inside? And I said, well, I didn't think he would have done what he did. And I will certainly be very interested to see whether the same strategy will be played out here this afternoon by either driver, or not forgetting Michael Schumacher and Mika Häkkinen. Those two behind any opportunity at all. And we saw back in Portugal a month ago, Mika Häkkinen made life very tough indeed for Alain Prost down the inside into that first corner at Estoril.
Well, if we go quickly through the top 10, John, I think it's an interesting front row, an interesting second row with Häkkinen and Schumacher. Berger and Hill on the third is interesting. Warwick and Eddie Irvine. And then, of course, Aguri Suzuki wants to impress in front of his home crowd. And last year's winner, Riccardo Patrese.
Well, I think obviously the only man that is a stranger amongst that group is Eddie Irvine, and quite a daunting task to start so high up in your first Grand Prix. But Eddie Irvine knows this circuit very, very well, and that hopefully will work to his advantage. But the man, as we said earlier in the morning broadcast, that I will keep an eye on will be Jean Alesi, who's all the way back on the 7th row, and he will want to get up to as near the front as quickly as possible because he will not want to lose contact. And the problem in Suzuka is there are very, very few places that overtaking is possible, and the most popular place is just after this, the quickest corner on the circuit, taken in 5th gear, and then all the way down the gearbox to 2nd gear into that chicane. That's the place if you feel you can do it under braking, but there you see the corner easily defended, and it's a very, very tight entry in, particularly the lead into the chicane, not just the chicane itself.
Well, Alain Prost is making his way to his grid position. Most of the drivers still have to come through that chicane. You see Irvine, there's Derek Warwick. Well, Derek is a man with an uncertain future, John.
Well, he went over to the States and had a look at IndyCar racing and had discussion with a number of teams, but I think a lot of those seats have been filled up very rapidly quite recently, and really no one is quite clear as to what Derek's plans are.
There we see the last cars making their way to the grid. Toshio Suzuki and Jean-Marc Gounon on the very last row of the grid, right behind Comas and Martini. So both the Larussi Minardi teams filling the last 4 places on the grid. And on the right you can see the man with the green flag. Well, you can't see him anymore, but you could just now. This is the man on pole position. Of course, pole position being on the outside. There is the green flag. The 5-second board's up. The red light will go on any second now, and it changes to green. Who has the best start? It is Ayrton Senna. Senna takes the lead from Alain Prost, but what's happening behind him? A very good start from Damon Hill. He's not taken that position from Michael Schumacher, but both Gerhard Berger and Damon Hill. Oh, Damon going around the outside of Michael Schumacher.
And look at Eddie Irvine. He's up in the 5th place.
Sorry. It is
superb start from Eddie Irvine, and Eddie Irvine had never made a Grand Prix start in a Grand Prix, let alone in practice. I think, in fact, what he was doing this morning was, rather than concentrating on getting his car right, well, one of the two Minardis, that's Jean-Marc Gounon, But Eddie Irvine spent a little bit of time making practice starts, and I tell you, practice makes perfect, and he had a great start in his first Grand Prix.
So did Ayrton Senna, who is leading. Alain Prost and Andrea de Cesaris is out on lap 1. So the first retirement of the afternoon is de Cesaris. Oh, and there Eddie Irvine defending his position.
He slammed the door right on. I think that was Michael Schumacher, one of the two Benettons. We couldn't quite see who it was, but certainly they had no mercy at all from Eddie Irvine in the hairpin. But Senna has the lead and he's extending it. This is the part of the circuit we saw throughout qualifying where the Williams, Renault and Prost and Damon Hill for that matter had an advantage. But Senna's lead is at least a second and a half as they come down to this very, very quick fifth gear left-hand corner, and then all the way down into this final chicane to complete the first lap. And this field, surprisingly, quite strung out.
So Ayrton Senna leading. Alain Prost in second place. Then it's Mika Häkkinen. But what a start from Eddie Irvine. And I actually got it wrong. I thought it was Damon Hill who made a very good start. Also a good start, John, from Gerhard Berger.
Well, Gerhard Berger, of course, on the 6th row, lost a place to Eddie Irvine, who must have had an absolute blinder. And looking at the start from that long shot, it was easy to misidentify because of the blue and the Williams and the blue and the Jordan. But it's that familiar bright orange helmet of Eddie Irvine's which stands out so much that in fact covers half of the airbox, and I'm sure that's costing him a few horsepower down the straight. But there's the man who spent all morning running on used tires. He used basically what he had left from the 2 days of practice. He kept the best of the tires from qualifying plus whatever was left. Here we see it again.
In replay, watch. Oh, Eddie Irvine made a cracker of a start and he went all the way around the outside. And I think we can say that is circuit knowledge.
That is definitely circuit knowledge. A fair amount of aggression. Here's again the view. And some of those people at the back, I think, were moving well and truly before the light went to green.
Also, I think Damon Hill, John, if you have a look, Damon got bogged down by Michael Schumacher and Eddie took full advantage of that.
Well, Damon happened to be on the inside of the circuit, inside of the corner, the right-hand side, and he just got trapped in there. And of course, that allowed the people on the left-hand side, therefore the outside. And of course, local knowledge is very, very valuable, and in a Formula 3000 race, you've got to take full advantage, and that's what Irvine has been doing here in Japan for the last 3 years. But look at the lead Senna has.
It was 2 seconds exactly on lap 1, and we're just waiting to see. I think that has been extended just a little bit. Now Ayrton is got to go fast from the word go, and then hope to consolidate and defend his position. Well, here's a man who was defending a position and attacking a position. Michael Schumacher not making his best of starts. A little tussle with Damon Hill on the first corner, and Damon undoubtedly will be breathing down Schumacher's neck.
Well, Eddie Irvine's maintaining that 5th position, and that's going to bring a lot of smiles to a lot of people, not least of all people in Northern Ireland, the Irvine family, but also for Jordan. It's been a very, very difficult year, and this is, apart from the outstanding performance from Rubens Barrichello and Donington at the European Grand Prix, this is the best performance we've seen in the rest of the season.
2.3 seconds the gap between Senna and Prost at the moment, and then a further 2 seconds to Mika Häkkinen, another 2 seconds to Gerhard Berger, and then a second to Eddie Irvine in 5th and Michael Schumacher in 6th position. That's the situation after 3 laps here in Suzuka. We're back after the break.
For the 3rd time, you can see the gap. Prost is definitely closer. Senna leads. Prost is second. Häkkinen, and Häkkinen tucks right into the apex in 3rd position. And the Finn, who drove so brilliantly in Portugal, said just before the race began that he knew what the mistake he'd made in Estoril was, and he wasn't going to make it here. And coming towards us now in 4th position is Berger. but Schumacher is 5th. There is Irvine in 6th position, and behind him Damon Hill is 7th, and that is Toshio Suzuki, not Toshio Suzuki, Gyuri Suzuki, who is in 8th position in the footwork. I got confused there because there are 2 Suzukis in this race. The Japanese veteran Toshio Suzuki is also competing and in the Larousse. But Senna now has got a 2-second lead over Alain Prost on the 4th lap. And Jonathan, would you have expected this? Because the Ford engine in the McLaren has certainly not got the power of the Williams, but Senna is holding the lead.
Well, that's right. The Ford engine doesn't have the power of the Williams by any means, but this is a real driver's circuit. It's a fantastic circuit. I spent about a year and a half testing here with McLaren, working on the active suspension program, and it's all twisting. There are lots of curves, as you can see that. It goes up and down, it's very undulating, and it's the sort of circuit where car balance and car grip and handling are of paramount importance, and Senna is the past master with the McLaren engineers at getting that sort of balance, and it's clearly paying dividends here. We know that, in fact, Williams have been in trouble. They haven't been able to run as much downforce as they'd like, and on a circuit like this that is so twisty, you need to get maximum grip. That means downforce, and that's perhaps why Williams haven't been as dominant here as they otherwise would. And also, of course, we've got Häkkinen, another great driver who's performed so well, right up there with Senna, qualifying within a 1/10 of a second. So it really looks like the good drivers and chassis are paying off here.
And we're with Michael Schumacher. The German is really flying in the Benetton, and in his sights and in your sight ahead is the McLaren Ford of Mika Häkkinen. So Schumacher is up into 4th position, Mika Häkkinen 3rd, and Schumacher challenging for that position. Ayrton Senna, though, still leads. We're on lap 5 of this 53-lap race, almost up to 1/10 distance already, and as you can see, Alain Prost is starting to whittle down the lead that Ayrton Senna has over him. It was 1.8 seconds, it's now 1.5, and I'll tell you, it is from the Spoon Curve exit, this is the hairpin, it's from the Spoon Curve exit that the Williams had the advantage in practice, because the combination, and there is Jean Alesi with Schumacher challenging him, Berger with Schumacher challenging him. Berger in 4th place in the Ferrari, and Schumacher trying to go around the outside and take 4th position. He's already passed Eddie Irvine, of course. So Senna leads, Prost is 2nd, and you can see how well the Ferrari is going. Gerhard Berger seems to have overcome that elbow problem of his.
Now, as they lead up towards the fastest corner on the circuit now, they're going to be pulling up to 190 miles an hour up this hill, through the next corner at 170 miles an hour. And it's after this where Schumacher needs to get right up with Berger if he's going to have a chance of going by into this chicane. But he's probably too far back. We can see that. He comes down through the gearbox, pushing that button to automatically come down to 2nd gear, looking right on top of Berger. But Berger will pull away now under acceleration, purely because Schumacher is physically a car length behind. He's probably missed his chance for another lap now.
The Ferrari's got the 4-valve V12 engine in it. The team has decided to settle for this new engine that Claudio Lombardi has produced. But Alain Prost, ahead of these two, has got the gap between himself and Ayrton Senna down to just a whisker over a second. And Damon Hill has passed Eddie Irvine and is up into 6th position. So race order on lap 6 out of 53. It is Senna leading Alain Prost by 1 second. 3rd is Häkkinen. 4th and 5th, you can see the battle between Gerhard Berger and Michael Schumacher, with Schumacher challenging the Ferrari. In 6th position now, it's Damon Hill. 7th is Eddie Irvine. In 8th position, Aguri Suzuki. 9th is his teammate Derek Warwick. In 10th place is Riccardo Patrese. In 11th position, it is JJ Leto in the Sauber. And in 12th place is John Alesi in the 2nd Ferrari, who started 14th, and of course he's in amongst the traffic. Curve and up to the fast left-hander after the crossover, where they're doing about 190 miles an hour, and they're there now, past the secondary pits.
Yes, now here you can see that Schumacher is much better placed to have a go at Berger. He's going through this 170 mile an hour fast corner game, but again, it's still probably not close enough. This was where Prost and and Senna had their coming together a few years ago. The car's slowing right down to 30 miles an hour in second gear for that. But actually interesting to see that Damon Hill has got back up into 6th place, past Eddie Irvine. It hasn't been a good qualifying session for Damon. He actually went off in the second qualifying very early on, and that caused him to be back in 6th place in the grid. Of course, it is also his first time here at Suzuka. It's a difficult circuit to learn. Actually, something which does apply to Irvine. He's raced here in Japanese Formula 3000 for some 3 years, so he's very familiar with the circuit.
But look at this, Berger 4th, Schumacher 5th, catching them. Damon Hill in 6th position. Damon Hill's first drive at this demanding track, and it showed yesterday when he went off in the qualifying session and lost a lot of time. He had been fastest at one point in the practice, but Alain Prost, using his superior experience of this circuit and Grand Prix in general, closed the gap, passed Damon Hill, took the pole position. Damon Hill then went off, started 6th, and Schumacher is now at the hairpin. And Damon Hill, you can see, is taking advantage of the fact that Berger and Schumacher are holding each other up in 4th and 5th places to close up in the more powerful Williams Renault. And Martin Brundle is 14th. In 17th position is Johnny Herbert in the Lotus. 18th is Mark Blundell. There are 6 British drivers in this race because Eddie Irvine is the 6th of them.
This is certainly going to be immensely disappointing and frustrating, perhaps more to the point, for Schumacher, because he is now some 13 seconds behind Senna in 2nd place. The Ferrari there at Berger really holding them up, and of course you can see just how fast Hill is closing up. And having said that, if Berger can keep precise, not make mistakes, this situation could continue for many laps yet.
Now Damon Hill, who has already shown us twice this year how he can fight back. He fought back from 26th, started last in Portugal, finished 3rd. In Monza, he fought back from 9th to win the race. Well, now he's in 6th position, which is where he started on the grid, but those are the 2 immediately in front of him. Ferrari, Gerhard Berger, that Benetton Ford of Michael Schumacher, and that is out of the race. No, not out of the race, he's rejoining. That's the second Japanese driver, Toshio Suzuki, in his first Grand Prix, and he's really fouling things up here.
Yes, he's really messed that up. He should have done a spin turn there to turn the car around. He doesn't have the lock, but now he's trying to find reverse gear, or now I think he has found reverse gear, and he's going to pull away again, get stuck on the gravel once again perhaps now. And in fact, Toshio Suzuki, was somebody with whom I drove in Formula 3 right back in 1981. He's 38 years old, and I don't think he's a driver who has any particular Grand Prix future.
But he has a great deal of money, and that is very useful in Japan, and particularly if you're the LaRousse team, because they need as much of it as they can get. And so Philippe Alliot sportingly stood down and allowed Suzuki to take his place to enable the Japanese driver to say before his career finishes that he drove in a Grand Prix. That is Mark Blundell, and that's what happened. And at the same time, Toshio Suzuki jolly nearly took out, but he did take out Pierluigi Martini's Minardi Ford, and you can see that Berger, Schumacher and Hill are still together as they complete the lap. Behind Ayrton Senna, Alain Prost is now the fastest on the circuit. He's under a second behind Ayrton Senna. Prost in 2nd place. In 3rd position, it's still Häkkinen. There's quite a gap. There's 7 seconds now between this battle for 4th position, between the Ferrari, the Benetton and the Williams, and the 3rd place McLaren Ford of Mika Häkkinen. And in 7th position, behind Damon Hill, it's still Suzuki. I say still, he's actually passed Eddie Irvine, who is therefore 8th. 9th is Derek Warwick in 10th position. It is Riccardo Patrese in the 2nd Benetton. And in 11th place, it is JJ Leto in front of his teammate Carl Wendlinger. And Jean Alesi has stopped. He's the 3rd retirement. Jean Alesi out of the Japanese Grand Prix to join the other retirees. There he is, his car being pushed to the side. De Cesaris out, and Suzuki not out, actually. He has rejoined, as you know.
Yes, it hasn't been a good weekend for Jean Alesi. He had quite a clonk in practice on the first day of qualifying. He kept his foot in too hard when he lost control or had a big slide, certainly coming out of the spoon curve, and this time got caught out, walloping the Encore on the left-hand side with moderate damage, and then had another off, although this time without damage, in qualifying on the Saturday.
Nevertheless, as a Ferrari fan, and who isn't, I am enormously heartened by the way Gerhard Berger is holding off this car that we're with. It's Michael Schumacher's Benetton Ford, and Schumacher, of course, has had an enormous amount of success this year. A win, 5 second places, 3 third positions, and look how close it is. 4th, 5th and 6th at the chicane. That is 9 laps completed in this 53-lap race.
Yes, you could see there that those cars were absolutely nose to tail at the chicane, as that must surely be Damon Hill.
5th position, and if he can blast past Michael Schumacher the way he did there, he is indeed the right man to be accompanying Ayrton Senna in the Williams team with their Renault engines next year. Incidentally, this is a good point to tell you, but Ron Dennis of McLaren has confirmed that his team will be using Peugeot V10 engines next year. So we've got the prospect of 2 superb Anglo-French teams, Williams with Renault engines, McLaren with Peugeot V10 engines in 1994. The rumour that Alain Prost had been approached by Ron Dennis to drive and not retire next year was not a rumour, it was true, but Prost has said he doesn't intend to come out of retirement. I will wait and see. We look back from Damon Hill's Williams Renault at Michael Schumacher's Benetton Ford. Actually, Schumacher is not nearly as far back as he looks there. The lens lengthens things, and you can see there's the gap. As Hill has thus gained a place, up from 6th on the grid to 5th in the race.
Again, here's where the Williams' horsepower can really show. He's pulling up behind Berger into the fast 130R, as it's called, and perhaps a bit too far back on this lap to have a go at Berger, but I'm sure one more lap on he will do. A yellow flag there. Somebody looks like they've gone off. Let's see if we can see it as we go through the corner. Hill right up behind. The traction control system's working overtime as they come out. It looks like a Laces car there as they pass by it on the exit of that corner. One more lap, I think, and then we're going to see Hill have a go at Berger.
And that is, of course, where Pierluigi Martini went off. And here is Hill having a go at Berger. But Berger, of course, is going to be very, very difficult to get past. There have been a lot of problems with Gerhard with some very aggressive driving this year. He's a double winner in Japan. He won in 1987 and 1991 when Senna donated the race to him at the very last corner to his McLaren teammate. And Gerhard Berger was second for McLaren last year. So few people know the Suzuka circuit at Grand Prix speed better than he does. And on lap 11 out of 53, Prost and Senna are 1.3 seconds away from each other in first and second places. 11 seconds now ahead of Mika Häkkinen. In 4th, 5th and 6th places you see Gerhard Berger, Damon Hill, Schumacher challenging, and behind
Damon Hill, who's defending his position to Michael Schumacher, and it seems like Gerhard Berger is getting away a little bit, but that's only at this part of the circuit, John.
Well, I think it's just simply a strategy, Allard, because he's got no need at this point of the circuit. It's not really realistic in my mind to try and overtake Berger, because you're coming up a very quick, well, the quickest part of the circuit. Oh, and look at Berger blocking. Now that is wrong, and if Berger keeps doing that, I would not be surprised to see a flag coming out for a stop-go penalty. Now, Damon, the long way around is very risky with Gerhard Berger. You might let Michael Schumacher slide through. Schumacher, in fact, is forced to go off the circuit. That's why he has hit his left front somewhere against the rear of Damon Hill's Williams, and that is just an even more, Schumacher just totally devastated by what went on, and that really was due to Gerhard Berger's blocking maneuver coming down the straight out of the long, fast left-hand corner. Then Damon Hill came on the outside. Fabio Briatore, totally disgusted, as is Michael Schumacher. A weekend when I felt that Schumacher was a certain potential winner. And what a way to end your Japanese Grand Prix. Let's look at it again. Here we are in camera. And Schumacher looking for somewhere to go. Well, he had no choice. The road was blocked. He couldn't slow down enough. He ran into the back of Damon Hill. Damon had to come to a virtual standstill as well because of Berger being so tight in that chicane. Well, back here we are with the lead. Senna still leading by just over 2 seconds. Alain Prost had made inroads into that lead. He's now lost some half a second from some 7 or 8 laps ago.
Would Prost just wait till the tyre stops, John?
He may well do, but if you look back over the last few Grand Prix, Williams have been very cautious with their pit stops. They've not gone for the record-breaking sub 5 second lap or 5 second pit stops. They've been more on the 7 to 8 second pit stops. McLaren have been very, very quick indeed. They've been in and around the 5 seconds, so they cannot take the risk. And
Berger's in. Gerhard Berger, we said the first man to make a pit stop. You even think he's going to make 3 pit stops during this Grand Prix. Well, he's in the pits for his first new fresh set of Goodyear rubber.
Well, if anybody's going to make 3, it is going to be Gerhard Berger. 5.41 seconds, very good indeed from Ferrari. And I would say a great deal of relief, principally from Damon Hill, because with that stop for tyres for Berger, effectively that will mean that he will remain behind the Williams when Damon Hill himself comes in for his first stop.
So Ayrton Senna, there we see Alain Prost 2.4 seconds behind him on the last lap. Mika Häkkinen 30 seconds behind race leader Ayrton Senna, and then Damon Hill is only 6 seconds behind Mika Häkkinen.
Well, I can only imagine Mika Häkkinen has a problem, because throughout the weekend he's been right on the pace with Ayrton Senna, and to be 30 seconds behind so early in a Grand Prix only indicates a problem. But Damon Hill will gobble those 6 seconds up very quickly. Now he is clear of Gerhard Berger, and Ayrton Senna now the first of the 2 McLarens in, and this is a very early stop for the McLaren team. Prost, of course, now in the lead, 5.13 seconds. Slightly hesitant at the back of the car, the jack, and one of the rear wheels not quite as ready as the front. But we have to wait now and see what is going to happen to Alain Prost, who is now in the lead for the first time of this year's Japanese Grand Prix.
John, going back to that little Schumacher, Hill and Berger incident, that Williams is a very strong car, while Mika Häkkinen just posts his fastest lap.
It is a very strong car. Williams have built very strong cars for a very long time, but in fairness to the Benetton, it depends how the suspensions, or the car is not designed, the front suspension is not designed for that type of loading. And I would think if a Williams had, if the situation had been reversed, put it that way, I'm sure the same result would have occurred to the Williams. It's just the way the impact was taken on that front suspension. And luckily for Damon Hill, we don't think there is any damage to the rear of the car, but of course, only Damon would know that.
There's Alain Prost trying to pass Toshio Suzuki, who very nice gets out of the way. So Prost leads Ayrton Senna. Prost again does not go into the pits. And that sound should be gone next year, John, the traction control sound.
Also, I think tyre wear will increase at a very rapid rate, because without traction control, that is the principal reason why teams are very keen indeed to retain traction control, because it makes the tyre life, the rear tyre life, very, very much easier. Now imagine a Japanese Grand Prix without traction control. We've seen Ferrari with Berger in the pits early. We've seen Ayrton Senna now on his second set of tyres. I would have thought that the options are that we are going to see much harder compounds in 1994, or drivers are going to have to learn to use the right foot to understand what throttle control is all about.
Mika Häkkinen is gaining a little bit on Alain Prost, is now 24 seconds behind. Ayrton Senna is only 13 seconds behind Alain Prost? Well, there's a pit stop, a very good pit stop, we should say, from Aguri Suzuki.
And Suzuki just pulling in behind one of the two Lotuses. Rubens Barrichello now somewhere or other up into the top 10.
Yeah, Barrichello's 10th. 11th is Ukio Katayama and 12th is Johnny Herbert. So I suppose that Suzuki just slotted in behind Johnny. But let's see what Alain Prost can do. Now he's got a clear road ahead of him. Can he extend his lead over Ayrton Senna, or is Ayrton Senna going to close in and retake that lead when Prost goes and gets a new set of tyres?
Well, certainly this lap should see a reduction in the difference. It was 13 seconds, and Senna on fresh rubber ought to be able to run certainly half a second a lap quicker than Alain Prost. Well, it's down to 11.5 seconds, so almost a second and a half a lap quicker. Alain Prost has got to go into the pits, I think, at the end of this lap. If he doesn't, it's going to be another second and a bit out of his lead. And if you think that the pit stop, the time in, it's a slowish entry into the pit lane, it's a good exit from the pit lane, I would say Ayrton Senna is going to be in the lead.
So we've seen pit stops from Berger, Senna and Suzuki. Ooh, brake disc. Very red indeed. I mean, those carbon brakes are something else, John.
It's an experience, Allard. Well, Allard Kalf and John Watson are going to find out just what the carbon brakes are like on a Williams Renault at the end of November. But certainly from my experience, and that's going back now a number of years when carbon brakes were in their infancy, they're just unlike anything else you've ever driven on. And that is probably, I think, one of the most difficult things for a newcomer to Formula One to come to terms with. To not just the braking ability, it's to actually make use of the potential the brakes have. And these cars brake literally so late. And that is also another reason why we're not seeing as much overtaking in Grand Prix racing as certainly everybody who watches on Eurosport would like to see. The braking zones are so short, and you've got to do your overtaking, in fact, before you get to the corner. In the older days, you used to be able to slingshot somebody into a corner. With carbon brakes at the level they are now developed, it's almost impossible.
Alain Prost lost a little of that lead because of back markers. It's now 11 seconds, and the big question is, well, we are on lap 18. Is Williams going to go with 1 or 2 stops? And is McLaren going to go with 2 or 3 stops?
Well, at the minute, I would say Williams are looking at just doing 1 pit stop. But McLaren, I think, are going to gamble on 2. And I think that they feel that that's the only way they can run at a pace that is hard enough to push Prost and hopefully push Prost into a second stop. So far, we're waiting to see when Prost is going to make his first stop. Senna currently running quicker by about half a second to up to a second. Traffic, of course, now coming into play, and that will affect the difference in the lead that Alain Prost has over Ayrton Senna.
Eddie Irvine back into the top 6 in 5th position. And there's 3 Brits, Hill, Irvine and Warwick, 4th, 5th and 6th. And the top 3, Prost, Senna and still Mika Häkkinen. And Häkkinen's best result ever is still a 4th position, and that was Hungary last year and France.
Well, that was a battling 4th place in Hungary. Had a wonderful battle with Martin Brundle. So the boy does know how to race. But maybe, if it isn't a problem, maybe a slightly more prudent drive from Mika Häkkinen this weekend in Japan.
We're on lap 20 out of 53. And please rejoin Eurosport after the messages that are following now. We'll be back very shortly.
And as I say that, there's a puff of smoke from the back of Comas's car. It looks as though the Lamborghini, yes, it very definitely has given way, and which reminds me of the fact that the much hoped for, as far as the Chrysler organisation was concerned, marriage between the McLaren team and Chrysler, who own Lamborghini and who hoped that McLaren would use their V12 engine in 1994, is not taking place as a result of a tie-up between McLaren and Peugeot. And a lot of teams, of course, are trying to get this very capable V12 engine. It's not very capable in Eric Comas's car at the moment, and the blue flag there is being waved by the Japanese marshal to tell Comas that he's being caught and about to be passed by Mika Häkkinen.
Yes, I certainly hope that we haven't got any problem from engine oil being deposited from that Lamborghini engine. The section on the S-bend section where that blow-up occurred is very tricky. You need to be on only one specific line, and if the oil's on that line, it's going to be a real problem for the following drivers, particularly in these potentially damp conditions. These conditions too will confer a bit of an advantage for the Williams team, because of course they're the only team that are running ABS braking, anti-lock braking, and when the conditions get marginal from grip level reducing, that's a definite advantage.
I think Alain Prost, who's actually holding his lead, despite the fact that his tyres are getting more and more worn, over Ayrton Senna. No, he's not. As I say that, the gap has come down from 10 seconds to 8 seconds. So Senna is starting to carve into Alain Prost's lead. The Frenchman leading by 8 seconds.
Welcome back here on Eurosport, and there we just got a glimpse of the footwork team with wet weather tyres ready. Rain has been threatening all morning, and well, we'll see when it rains hard enough to put the wets on. Damon Hill still in 4th position, 44 seconds behind Alain Prost. But what's more interesting, I think, John, is that Senna is gaining on Prost, but also Häkkinen is gaining very rapidly on the race leader.
Well, Alain Prost steadfastly has refused to make or be pressured into making a pit stop as early as his competitors, and Damon Hill, you see, struggling a little bit now. His rear end grip probably has suffered as a consequence of having to battle in the earlier laps.
Also, I think it's starting to rain a bit harder, John, now.
Well, we saw a set of wet weather tyres in the footwork pits, but one thing is for sure, they wouldn't be putting out a set of dry tyres, because they will be sitting cooking away in the tyre warmers, and they will only be brought out on the lap the car was due in. But there was, before the start of the Grand Prix, there was a sort of very, very light skiff of rain. Not enough to wet the track, but it was in the air. And look at that, just coming to spoon. Damon, you could see the first part of the corner suddenly got out of the throttle fairly suddenly, and the car did not look particularly stable.
There we see some more rain on that camera lens, while the gap between Prost and Senna is now stabilizing around 7 seconds, and Damon Hill into the pits. Damon Hill, the first Williams driver to come into the pits for a fresh set of rubber.
Well, this is going to be a telltale sign for Alain Prost. Let's see how quickly the Williams team can resurface. Damon Hill, 6 seconds. Much better than in Estoril. Fresh set of slicks for Damon. So a nice little practice for the Williams team. And look at the gaggle of cars behind, and Eddie Irvine leading them down into this first. And Irvine is going to undoubtedly put Damon under a little bit of pressure as he just picks up the pace on that fresh set of tyres, but that will only be for about half a lap. And well, the back of the circuit certainly becoming a little bit more treacherous. You can see how much slower everybody's running. And of course, Damon on those fresh tyres, not at all happy having made that choice. Berger looking to go the long way around Riccardo Patrese. And now the rain, you can see on the camera lens, but just as directly behind the pits, and the circuit is getting slick.
I tell you what, a man who loves this is Mika Häkkinen.
Well, I'll take your word for that, Allard.
He does. Well, and Alain Prost doesn't like it, because Ayrton Senna's close up to 1 second, and there is Ukio Katayama off the circuit. Can he get back on? Yes, he can get back on. Senna 1 second behind Alain Prost. Häkkinen 18 seconds behind Alain Prost. So, don't know whether the Japanese director will be able to leave Ukio Katayama. But I think there is a battle for the lead, unless we're missing Alain Prost's pit stop.
And the rain falling heavily. You can see now all around the circuit umbrellas going up, and you can see clearly. And there on the main straight, and a very, very treacherous part of the circuit, this left-hand corner. It's very easy indeed to come into it too quickly.
Oh, there's Rubens Barrichello.
Well, Rubens Barrichello, remember back to Donington, to the European Grand Prix, and Ayrton Senna, these two Brazilians, outstanding performances in atrocious conditions, and now Ayrton Senna has taken the lead from Alain Prost, and really not any surprise to me. It's in conditions like this that Senna really is absolutely outstanding, and Patrese in the pits, and this will not be for a set of dry tyres. He's the first man we have seen in the pits for wets, and the rear is having a problem. The back of the car is still jacked up, and I just wonder how long we can see Senna retain the lead on slicks, and now the pit lane turning into almost a Piccadilly circus. Senna in the pits, coming in behind Pierluigi Martini, and this is again a time for caution, because in the pit lane it is every bit as treacherous as the racetrack. Ukio Katayama made it back to the pits, and Senna gingerly making his way into the pits. Very easy to overshoot, just lock up a brake. Wet tyres on for Senna. Good pit stop, 5.5 seconds. And we still have not seen Alain Prost. I don't know what Prost is.
There's Häkkinen in the pits, and does the team have the tyres ready? Yes, they do. And Prost is in and out as well. In the background, we saw Alain Prost.
Well, there he is now, leaving the pit lane. And Alain Prost has lost the lead, and really, I have to say, part of it was maybe his strategy in staying out quite a long time in his first set of tyres, but ultimately, weather was the factor. And Ron Dennis now, well, is that a smile on Ron Dennis's face, or is that a smile?
So Ayrton Senna leading from Alain Prost, and Martin Brundle said Suzuka is always good for a surprise. Well, it's a surprise.
Well, even I predicted there was going to be, or could be, rain here in a preview I did earlier in the week, but I didn't have to be very clever to do it. It is very unpredictable at Suzuka, and well, this is really for the Japanese not even rain. This is just a sprinkling. When it rains here, it comes down like monsoon.
Now, if I'm not mistaken, John, we have Senna, Prost, Häkkinen, and behind Mika Häkkinen is Eddie Irvine in 4th position. Then it's Damon Hill in 5th. Rubens Barrichello is 6th. So there's not one, but 2 Jordans in the top 6.
Well, they're very fond of lotteries in Japan, and one thing is for sure, this race is turning into a lottery, and the conditions are deteriorating very rapidly as Aguri Suzuki, who ought to know better at Suzuka, has gone off, and that is coming on the main straight. And can he get it back without, well, not the part of the circuit you want to be going across at 90 degrees to traffic coming towards you. Well, Ayrton Senna just piling on the coals now, and these are the conditions that we've seen over many, many years. He just manages to rise even higher above.
Has Eddie Irvine driven this car yet in the wet, John?
Well,
maybe.
My spy at Silverstone tells me that he has been out in the rain. And Mika Häkkinen
taking 2nd place away from Alain Prost. Prost under pressure from Mika Häkkinen. there we see the world champion, and Häkkinen is taking that second place.
Well, this is going to get worse and worse, I suspect, and Mark Blundell getting a wobble as Mika Häkkinen taking a slightly wider line, staying out. Well, that is not a very intelligent thing to do. I mean, it looks great, but what Gugnon was doing, I have no idea. He was coming around the corner. I would have said, very gently indeed, he just touched the throttle pedal and pirouetted. Prost past Mark Blundell, Mika Häkkinen past Mark Blundell. Of course, the problem Mika Häkkinen has got is the closer he gets, the more spray he has coming off the back of Alain Prost's car, and the circuit getting wetter and wetter, and that visibility. And Mika Häkkinen looks to me like he's wearing a dark visor as well, which will not be the most ideal for these conditions.
So Häkkinen dropped back a little bit again, but well, a race. 23 seconds the lead Ayrton Senna has over Alain Prost at the moment, John.
Well, Alain Prost certainly drove some good races in wet conditions. Donington was not one of them, but he certainly at Silverstone on Friday in the morning, when it was very, very wet indeed, was outstanding. But this is a Grand Prix, and well, when it comes to Grand Prix, Senna in the rain is really the master.
So Senna leads Prost, Häkkinen and Eddie Irvine, while Damon Hill's dropped down to 7th position for the moment. That's the situation at a very wet Suzuka circuit. We'll be back after the break for more.
Is not for the lead, which is held very convincingly by Ayrton Senna, now 27 seconds ahead of these two being Alain Prost, there he is, and Mika Häkkinen. Now one has to say, has Alain Prost got the motivation with his 4th World Championship stitched up, with only one race to go after this one, that's in Australia in 2 weeks' time, really to go for it and try and catch and pass Senna?
Well, I'm sure Prost will think he's got the motivation, but equally I'm sure that his motivation does not equal that of Mika Häkkinen behind. Häkkinen will be trying harder, will be taking more chances, and in these kind of conditions, that sort of chance-taking approach will pay off. You know, when you're taking a Grand Prix car through a rain-sodden circuit there, cornering at 170 miles an hour, balancing on the limited grip, you cannot even see where the puddles and things are. These are dreadful conditions to be driving in. I can't emphasize how lack of visibility just makes it so demanding, and Prost does not like these conditions. He doesn't mind the slippery conditions, having said that. What he doesn't like is a lack of visibility. Now, I think where that will manifest itself is that as and when Häkkinen does get by, or Prost comes up behind traffic, that's actually Hill there, I think up behind Berger, but as and when Prost loses his visibility, that's when we shall see him slow up considerably more.
Well, the doughty veteran Derek Warwick, the second oldest man in the race at 39 years old, as Hill goes through and takes the Ferrari of Gerhard Berger. Derek Warwick is in 4th position, but I suspect he's not going to be there very much longer, because Damon Hill has really got the hammer down. He's in 5th place, having passed Gerhard Berger's Ferrari. You just saw him do it. Under the crossover now, up to the fast left-hander, then the chicane, and Warwick's Mugen car, which is the engine which is going to be used in the Lotus team next year, although it has been much improved with a special version of the V10 for Japan. It's a Japanese company, of course, has not got the power of the V10 Renault, and Damon Hill is the man who knows how to use it. This is the spoon curve, and off goes the Sauber there of Karl Wendlinger, and he rejoins. That's the crossover point as well, and there's Derek Warwick. Now this is the battle for 4th position. Warwick 4th, Damon Hill in 5th place. In the spray behind them is Gerhard Berger, who is in 6th position. 7th is now Rubens Barrichello after the tyre stops, 8th is Riccardo Patrese, and that is Carl Wendlinger having a 720-degree spin, a double 360. Now, has he got the grip to get going again? We didn't see.
Well, I'm sure he did. One of the things that Wendlinger did do correctly there was keep the engine running, and you could see how violently that car spun, but the good drivers, and Wendlinger is certainly one of those, can keep their head together, dip the clutch, keep revving the engine to keep the thing from stalling until it stops to enable them to carry on again. As there we are, we watched Hill now. Hill's now got the same problem behind Warwick as Hakkinen has behind Prost, lack of visibility when he gets close. Now what Hill needs is for Warwick to make a little bit of a mistake and lose a bit of momentum to allow him to come up alongside, get some visibility and get ahead. And that could happen at a number... There we are, that looks like it's just what's happened there. Oh, that is very good driving by Hill. Round the outside of the last part of the S corner. That's very good indeed. He found that visibility. Actually, interestingly there, by taking the outside line, and I know this from experience at this circuit, the outside line has more grip than the inside line. Where the cars regularly run in dry conditions, the rubber and the oil tends to be such that in the wet, you can often find more grip by going off the line, finding some fresh tarmac that hasn't been ingrained with the rubber and the oil, and that's presumably there, I'm sure, what Damon Hill took an advantage from.
Well, Damon Hill superbly up to 4th position with that enormously brave move. Down to 5th goes Derek Warwick. Behind him is Gerhard Berger, ahead of Damon Hill with a very secure lead now, seemingly on his way to a 4th Grand Prix victory in 1993, Ayrton Senna, and that's something that he can't possibly have expected at the beginning of the season, because last year the McLaren team lost their Honda V12 engines, and you're looking at the dancing feet now of Ukio Katayama in the Tyrrell Yamaha. The wobbling bit at the top is the universal joint at the end of the steering column. The right foot, of course, and talk us round, Jonathan, what are his feet doing?
Well, you can see him coming down into the hairpin now. Now look as he changes gear. His clutch foot will just go down, and look at how quickly those feet rock. Now he's only having to do that because the Tyrrell does not have a semi-automatic gearbox. Watch when he changes down again, you'll see the feet blip the throttle. But with the cars like the Williams and the McLaren, they don't have to do that. They don't have to double declutch because the computers do it all. You can see how closely those pedals are set. There's only 1 foot or 30 centimeters of width in that pedal box. The designer's trying to keep the cockpits minimally wide so the cars can cut through the air as finely as possible.
See him out of the cockpit, certainly in terms of physique, doesn't look capable of driving a Grand Prix car. He's very much capable of doing so. He's had a lot of offs this year, but he's in his element at Suzuka. It's his home track.
Yes, now you can see Senna there again take a wide line. He wasn't offline, he was deliberately running wide of the conventional dry line to pick up this grip. There he's doing it again. This is where you get this fresh tarmac with more grip. But I think that the rain has actually abated. You can see some drops on the camera there, and looks like Wendlinger pulling off there with a problem for Wendlinger along the main start-finish straight. But even if it stops raining now, it's going to take a good 10 laps before the track dries out enough for slick tyres to be considered, I'm quite sure.
Now there's Martin Brundle in the new liveried Ligier, the blue and white car. He is chasing Riccardo Patrese, who is in 8th position, and behind Brundle is Eddie Irvine, who is in 10th place. So 8th, 9th, 10th, Patrese, Brundle and Irvine in Benetton, Ligier and Jordan Hart. But on lap 27, which is the half-distance lap of the Japanese Grand Prix, Ayrton Senna is increasing his lead remorselessly. 31 seconds is the gap now as Irvine pushes Martin Brundle very hard indeed. Eddie Irvine, using his knowledge of Suzuka to the maximum, pushing Martin Brundle for that 9th position. So, into the hairpin. Patrese, 9th. Brundle... Sorry, Patrese 8th, Brundle 9th, Eddie Irvine in 10th position. Great roosters of spray coming up from the rear wheels of these cars, and there's some 750 horsepower behind each driver, putting the power down through those rear wheels in a car that weighs about 500 kilograms. A fantastic power-to-weight ratio in the dry. On the wet, of course, in the wet it's just like driving on ice.
Yes, Irvine trying very hard indeed there. He had quite a big slide through that turn 2 on the circuit. Of course, at these speeds in the wet, the sheer airflow drives the water droplets off the visor. Providing one is doing more than about 30 miles an hour, windscreen wipers really are not required. What can be a problem, though, is that if the drivers have these thin films of plastic, the rip-offs on their visor, which you need for dry conditions to enable you to pull a strip off once you get oil on it. In the wet, they're a real liability because the water droplets get between the layers and really obscure the vision badly. So in these situations, the drivers will almost certainly pull off those rip-offs, leaving them with just the open basic visor. Now there is Irvine having a good look at Brundle, and I think he's going to have a good chance of going by. He knows this circuit intimately. He races here in Formula 3000, in Japanese 3000. And this section from the hairpin, in fact, now towards the spoon corners in the dry is absolutely flat out, up to a maximum of 180 miles an hour. Probably flat out now, I would think, too. But we need to watch Irvine. He was very quick through this spoon corner before. There's some traffic. That'll help him. And but what he didn't do particularly well the last time was pace himself through that 130R, the very fast next left after this straight, because it's into the subsequent chicane where he needs to be in the right place.
Well, who is this man, Eddie Irvine? He's 27 years old. He comes from Conlig in County Down, and he's the ex-British Formula Ford champion, and he drove in Formula 3. Then he went to Formula 3000. Out of the race goes Akio Katayama to join his teammate Andrea De Cesaris, and that means De Cesaris is out, Alesi is out, Schumacher is out, Karl Wendlinger is out, Katayama is out. We're on lap 28. Ayrton Senna is leading Prost, and it's starting to dry out. But Prost has got 30 seconds to make up before he even catches Ayrton Senna. And as I've said many, many times, catching is one thing, passing is quite another, particularly when it's Ayrton Senna who's in front of you. In third place is Mika Häkkinen, a long way behind Alain Prost. In fourth place, Damon Hill. Fifth is Derek Warwick. In sixth position, up into sixth position, comes and that is Damon Hill off. Rubens Barrichello is up into sixth, but Damon Hill has gone off, and he very sensibly runs wide, uses his head, and rejoins the circuit. That was a very, very close thing indeed. If he'd gone into the gravel track, he would have lost traction, and up alongside him now comes Eric Comas, trying to get past the Williams. Damon will understandably have nothing of it. Now, to get back to race lap 29, Senna, Prost, Häkkinen is the order. Damon Hill in fourth place. Derek Warwick fifth. Sixth is Barrichello. Seventh is Gerhard Berger. Eighth is Riccardo Patrese. Ninth is Martin Brundle. In 10th position is Eddie Irvine. And then in 11th place is JJ Leto, who has been lapped. So Ayrton Senna, the leader, as off goes Prost now. Now, the problem with the Williams, with Damon Hill and Prost both having gone off, is significant.
Well, I'm not sure that it is really, Murray. I think that it's probably entirely coincidence with those two both going off. It might just be that as the conditions are drying slightly, that the tyres are starting to go off, these wet tyres, because wet tyres do not cope well with the drying track. You can see that the spray has reduced substantially, and in fact, once these tyres get hot, the tread blocks start to go like putty, and the cars can become relatively imprecise to drive and get sloppy. Maybe that's what's happening, and that looks like Patrese off as well. So maybe we have got a problem here with the wet tyres overheating on this drying track. We do think the ambient temperature is quite high, so it is possible there. But in these situations, the driver needs to, in fact, try and keep on. Here's a replay of Prost there. Let's have a look. He's in. That's the Degner curve by the look of it. He's run wide into that first corner. He's got it back. A good thing is that the rain has at least hardened up that gravel and has not dragged the cars down and put them out of the race, and that clearly benefited both Hill and Prost.
Good point there, Jonathan. The rain has compacted the gravel and the sand and provided some traction, and instead of the cars bogging down, they're able to drive through it. A good thing for them. A bad thing, of course, if they're going very quickly, and that's one of the footwork cars. Is it Warwick or is it Suzuki? It's Suzuki. So Aguri Suzuki on his home track, bitter disappointment for the Japanese driver, leaves his own Grand Prix. He was in 12th position, a long way down, compared with the excellent position he had earlier on in the race. And on lap 30, Ayrton Senna is holding his lead, nearly a half a minute ahead of Prost, who is 6 seconds ahead of Häkkinen. You're looking at Prost now, and of course Mika Häkkinen will have closed up a bit on the Frenchman as a result of Prost going across the apex.
Yes, now what's important here in these conditions now, as the track dries out, is for the drivers to move offline on the straights to try and cool these tyres down by moving on to a more sodden part of the track, because as I've said, if they stay on the drying line, the wet tyres will overheat very quickly, and that will compromise their grip through the corners. So they should be just trying to cool them off a bit. The ambient temperature is relatively high, so the track could dry pretty quickly.
Estimate McLaren is what one of its top sponsors, Sipco Heisman, said to me at the South African Grand Prix when I said that I didn't think McLaren, with the new car and the Ford engine that they weren't used to, would have as good a season as they had in the past. Well, they haven't had as good a season, but already this year, the brilliant 3 times world champion Ayrton Senna that you're looking at has won 3 Grand Prix, 2 of them in dreadful conditions in Brazil and Donington, the 3rd at Monaco. It looks as though he's on his way to a 4th Grand Prix win, and that'll help him with closing the gap between himself and Damon Hill, who is 2nd in the World Championship with Senna in 3rd place. Senna has not got a problem with Michael Schumacher, who was only 1 point in the World Championship behind him when this race started, because Schumacher, of course, has long since disappeared from the Suzuka track after he hit Damon Hill and deranged the left front suspension of his Benetton. But Senna will, at minimum, want to finish 2nd in the World Championship this year, and he will be getting, to the extent that he can think about it when he's concentrating at the wheel, a great deal of grim satisfaction from the fact that he's seeing off his rival Alain Prost, whose place he will be taking in the Williams-Renault team next season.
Yes, you could really see again there that wide line being taken by both Senna there and the car in front through the hairpin to Jordan. But on the Jordan subject, Barrichello has of course moved ahead now of Eddie Irvine, and look, there's a little twitch from Senna. He's still trying hard. Barrichello has moved ahead of Eddie Irvine, and I think really that comes down to the fact that Irvine stayed out too long on the slick tyres in the wet conditions. You lose time fantastically fast in wet conditions on slick tyres. You really do need to come in very quickly and put wets on. Irvine, despite his circuit knowledge, perhaps because it was new to him, didn't come in early enough. In other words, if it hadn't been for that, I think he'd have been in 6th place now.
So we're with Mika Häkkinen's car now, looking back, and we understandably can't see anything because Damon Hill is too far back as Ayrton Senna comes up to lap the Jordan Hart of Eddie Irvine. And the Jordan Harts, the Hart part, of course, being Brian Hart's V10 engine, the first season in Grand Prix racing, and it's exclusively used by Jordan. It's gone jolly well all season, but it hasn't gone as well in the Jordan as it is here, because Rubens Barrichello, the new Senna from Brazil, and he's the youngest man in the race because he is only 21 years old, is in the points in 6th position, and his teammate Eddie Irvine is in 9th place in his first Grand Prix. Both the Jordan Harts in the top 10, and hopefully it will be at Suzuka where they score at least their first World Championship point for 1993. Ayrton Senna dives inside at the right-hander and passes Eddie Irvine, who is in 9th position. So now Senna has lapped everybody up to Gerhard Berger, who is 8th.
Yes, we can see there 45 seconds Senna's lead over Häkkinen. Häkkinen's been dropping back 5 seconds a lap over the last couple of laps, so clearly has a problem. We don't know what it is, but a great shame for the Finn, because he's been in great form in qualifying, once again being within 1/10 of a second of Senna, and I'm sure that has really raised Senna's game. He's had somebody alongside him, unlike Michael Andretti, who's really pushed him and caused him to extract whatever extra performance he can, and clearly it's working to very good effect here.
Lap 32 out of 53, and we're getting some blue sky at Suzuka. It's going to start to dry out, but it'll be too late for Prost, I'm sure, even if with the very close performance between the McLaren Ford and the Williams Renault, he was able to close the gap a bit in the drive. Senna goes through to the chicane to complete another lap. It's his 32nd that he's completing, half a minute ahead of Prost, who is 15 seconds ahead of Mika Häkkinen in third place. And into the pits comes Gerhard Berger for a second tyre stop. Gerhard Berger is notoriously hard on tyres, and he's putting a fresh set of wets on, so Ferrari certainly don't believe it's drying out.
Well, he's got that second set of wets, and that really is significant, because normally there is no case of putting on new wets. It's a very, very rare sight. We must conclude from that, that looks more than spray on that almost. No, I think it's just spray. We must conclude from that there is a problem with the wet tyres overheating, and that probably has caused these drivers, and certainly, Berger having a bit of a moment once again on an early stage, that probably has provoked some of these spins that we've been seeing, which haven't taken place in the worst of the weather. They've taken place when the track started to dry out and when, as I've suggested, those wet tyres have started to go off. In fact, it's quite remarkable, really, how with 750 horsepower and just 500 kilos, performance of 0 to 150 in 6.5 seconds, these cars can be controllable at all with such little grip. But that's largely a virtue of, well, I suppose one has to say it's largely a virtue of the driver's skill, but it's also a consequence of the level of technology that's on these cars. With traction control systems, wheel spin is more or less barred. With ABS braking on 1 or 2, you can't lock a wheel either. The electronic aids on these cars really are contributing massively to making them relatively easy to drive in these conditions compared to life 3 or 4 years ago.
Electronic aids, which of course are going to be banned in 1994. No traction control, no ABS brakes, and no active suspension. But Gerhard Berger rejoined in 8th position after that second tyre stop. You're watching him now. Behind him in 9th place is Riccardo Patrese. Just behind him in 10th position is the Sauber Ilmor of JJ Leto, and it's still on lap 33 out of 53. Ayrton Senna. Alain Prost has closed up very slightly. He's 28 seconds now behind the Brazilian. And a long way back now, Mika Häkkinen in third place. He could be on target to score points in a McLaren for the first time, though. Damon Hill is fourth. Derek Warwick is fifth. Rubens Barrichello is still sixth. In seventh place is Martin Brundle, who's soon going to be caught and lapped by Ayrton Senna. Eighth, having been lapped, is Eddie Irvine. Ninth is Gerhard Berger, that you're looking at. In 10th place is Patrese. 11th is JJ Leto, and in 12th place appropriately, number 12, Johnny Herbert, having a pretty awful race in the Lotus Ford. It's the last time but one he'll be with Ford car. He's been confirmed as the lead driver for Lotus next year, when they will be using Mugen Honda, or Honda Mugen, which is really, in terms of importance, the way to put it, engines next year. That is Prost.
Yes, and next year these electronic aids will be banned. No active, no traction control, no ABS braking. And in fact, I think we are looking at the end of an era here. We've had the turbo era in the early 80s. Before that, the ground effect era. We've now got the electronics era, and we're now looking at the penultimate race in which the tremendous capability of this technology is going to be demonstrated. One more race to go, Adelaide. It'll all be over. The end of another era.
Lap 34, and the tyre story is going to start all over again. Because, as you can see, looking at your monitors, it is a lot brighter. The sun has come out, the track is starting to dry, and Damon Hill is coming in, and I think he's going to take on slick tyres. There he is. Now, are they? I'm looking very closely. Yes, they are. They're slick tyres, and Damon Hill was in 4th position when he came in, and he's taken a calculated risk. Patrick Head and Adrian Newey and all the other people who contribute to it, with Damon, of course, and he's the man who's operating the loud pedal, that slicks are the wear. But Martin Brundle has gone through ahead of Damon Hill, so Damon is down to 8th position behind the Englishman in the Ligier, and behind him is Ayrton Senna.
Yes, and here's a great chance to see just how right that decision was. Senna on wet tyres, Hill on slick tyres. if you can get on slick tyres on a drying track early enough, and that looks like Berger in again. Now, and one really wonders why he put wets on for a second time, only for 3 or 4 laps. That didn't look a good decision. Maybe he had another problem. Most likely, though, he thought the rain was going to continue. No, he's got another nose about to go on. So clearly there's been he's presumably had an off there. It'll be good to see when we get back to the leaders, though. Are going to compare. There's Hill still ahead of Senna, almost certainly. So it looks like he's doing reasonably well. And over the next lap, I think we shall get a very clear indication as to whether or not slicks or wets are the right tyre at the moment.
Now, my suspicious mind is saying to me that the Williams team know that Damon Hill on the right tyres is ahead of Ayrton Senna, who's leading the race, followed by Alain Prost. And if, just if, as you can see the dry line emerging, Damon Hill made it really difficult for Ayrton Senna to get past him by taking a wider line on corners than he need, or a tighter line on corners than he need, it would give Alain Prost the opportunity to close up.
Yes, you can see there where Damon Hill could take the correct dry line on the inside. Senna on his wets had to go wide to find the grip. Different driving style with different tyres on the same track.
And look at the way Eddie Irvine was pushing Ayrton Senna. That is the Irishman in the Jordan Hart, and he's giving Ayrton Senna a very hard time. Right up alongside him again, and is he past? Yes! Yes, he is! Eddie Irvine is past Ayrton Senna. I don't think there's any question of him taking it easy at this stage of the race. And, oh, look at that! Tyre and wheel off now. What did it come off? I can't... Well, let's have a look. There's a car somewhere with only 3 wheels on it. Well, would you believe it? well, it's not the McLaren anyway. And it's not Eddie Irvine, and it's not Damon Hill, and Ayrton Senna is not making... Oh, there it's Martin Brundle. It's Martin Brundle. You can see his right front is locked up, and when the wing clears the picture, you'll see that his left... Oh, thank you. We don't want to look at the front of the car, we want to look at the back of the car. There you go. No left rear. Martin Brundle gives us a nice look at the new graphics on the Ligier with its Renault engine, but he would have preferred it to be in different circumstances. Now, I can only assume that Martin Brundle had come in from a tyre stop and the wheel nut had not been put on tight enough or properly. I'm only guessing, but I can't think of any other reason why the wheel should come off as cleanly as that.
No, it seems a bit late for that. I'm sure Martin's been on wet tyres for a long time. But you can see the sparks coming off with a bit of luck. The car's just running on the skid blocks there. And with a new set of, this time, slick tyres on the car, he could yet be back in the action.
Don't leave the room. Things are really starting to happen, because Alain Prost is closing in on Ayrton Senna, who cannot catch and get past Eddie Irvine, let alone Damon Hill, who is on slick tyres. Alain Prost has got the gap down to 24 seconds now, and it was not so very long ago nearly 32 seconds. So Alain Prost has taken 8 seconds.
Well, Eddie Irvine's certainly very keen to take position away, and he has taken position away, but of course, as you say, Eddie Irvine has to go into the pits, and he's got a big slide, and I don't know whether he's been able to keep the momentum. He's lost it, but he's not giving up. The boy from Conlig, County Down, Northern Ireland. Look, I'm sure Damon Hill and the Senna have not got any idea what is going on all around him. Here's a guy they've never even probably heard of, and Eddie Irvine just misses, and he's going up the inside again. Well, I tell you, the folks back home in Northern Ireland are having a real treat, and there's going to be contact.
No, this is motor racing, boys. This is what motor racing's all about. Overtaken and being overtaken. Let's just hope both Eddie and Damon are not going to get a 10-second stop and go penalty, because in the meantime, Alain Prost is 20 seconds behind Ayrton Senna.
Well, Senna will not be at all happy, and once he realizes that the lead, the comfortable lead he had, and look at Irvine under-braking, twitching all over the place, Senna finally sees the opportunity to go through, but that's not going to stop Eddie Irvine. He's going to come straight back. He wants Damon Hill's place.
Well, some people thought that Eddie Irvine would do these 2 Grand Prix and then settle back into the Japanese 3000 series. Well, I'm not so sure when you see this.
Well, I just wonder, can Eddie Jordan afford him in 1994?
So, after A sensational test by Jos Verstappen. Could this be another sensation in the last couple of months of the Formula One season? Eddie Irvine.
Well, I spoke to Eddie before he left to Japan, and he had fairly clear ideas about what he saw a future in Formula One being, and he certainly doesn't want to go into a team that isn't going to be competitive. He certainly doesn't want to go to a team where he has to take money, and he would certainly like to be paid. And that's a tall order for somebody approaching their first full season of Grand Prix racing.
Derek Warwick is in 4th position, Barrichello 5th, 6th is Damon Hill, and 7th is Eddie Irvine. So I think it's a very good debut. And there's Pedro Lamy in for slicks, and Ayrton Senna is still keeping up with Damon Hill and being a little quicker, and Ayrton is actually still on wet weather tyres.
Well, I think the balance and time between slicks and wet weather tyres is sort of even Stevens. There are parts of the circuit that Damon, and Senna very, very wide indeed, and Eddie Irvine following suit. Yet here you can see there is now a dry line, and that will help and suit. But Senna looking to, there he goes, but he's got to be careful. That's an easy place to overshoot. We've seen 3 people go off there earlier in the race, and now the road is clear once again for Eddie Irvine to mount another attack on Damon Hill.
John, how long can they go on these wet weather tyres when the track is actually drying out?
Well, the track is drying out in places, but the balance of the circuit has not swung yet favourably to dry tyres. It's just on the limit. Eddie Irvine knows more about this circuit than Damon Hill knows. He knows more about what it's like to drive in this temperature. So he's taking the risk. He knows, or in his mind he thinks he knows anyway, that I'm better to stay out and do the best I can on wet weather tyres. If I go into the pits onto slicks, I'll never catch Damon up anyway. Damon may make a mistake, he might get caught out, so I suppose that's his logic, and I would think that the team would support that decision. But this is real fingertip stuff from Damon Hill. It is not easy when you've got something like 760 horsepower. In spite of traction control, you've got to basically keep the car under control. Traction control will help the straight line stuff, but in a corner when the car is not head on to the track, it is very, very fine indeed.
Damon Hill and Ayrton Senna, they're not first and second in this Grand Prix. Damon is a lap behind, and the gap between Senna and Prost is now down to 13.6 seconds. And there is Alain Prost still on the wet weather tyres. And, well, with about 12, 13 laps to go, time's running out to go in and get slicks as well.
Well, I was noticing Alain Prost is, I think, really looking for as many damp parts of the circuit as he can. He wants to preserve as long as possible any wet weather rubber he has got left. And once the circuit begins to dry out, of course, it becomes more and more difficult. But it'd be interesting to know what the lap times are, the variation in lap time between Alain Prost on wets, Damon Hill on slicks. I suspect the difference is very small, and the security that Prost would feel on wet weather tyres would probably tip the balance that way.
Alain Prost overtaking Derek Warwick. Well, he's not, but again, Prost being his cautious self.
Very right to be cautious, because really he didn't have himself far enough up alongside of Derek Warwick to be sure the corner would have been his, and Warwick did the right thing and took the line, and he'll know that Alain Prost is there.
Of course, Derek Warwick, another man who's very familiar with the Suzuka circuit, because he's done quite a lot of sports car races here.
Yes, sports car racing is a great way to learn this circuit. It's probably the best way, I would have thought. And well, Warwick
on slicks.
Yes, on slicks as well, and Alan Prost on wet with their tyres, so Warwick being careful. Oh, and almost losing it as he exited, and Alan Prost now very easily drives all the way around the outside safely as Derek Warwick's heart reduces from whatever 200 and something beats per minute it rocketed up to. And that's the danger that anybody on slicks has got to face. Oh, and you see again just how easy, just clipping the curb at the inside, back of the car steps out.
Warwick in 6th position, behind Eddie Irvine, behind Damon Hill, Hakkinen, Prost and Senna. There we see the dry patches on the circuit.
Well, the cloud certainly has cleared away, and now it's very much a circuit, I would say, that is going to favour anyone on slicks. And I just wonder whether Alan Prost will take the chance. Yes, he is. He's going into the pit lane. He's decided that there is now enough sunshine out and enough dry bits around the circuit to justify a fresh set of slicks. And of course, one wonders what Senna will do. If I was in his situation, I would, at the end of the lap I'm on, follow suit. Well, Alan Prost making sure he doesn't stall it. He certainly had plenty of revs. Wound on the old Renault V10 engine. Not giving it full revs down the pit lane though, Allard. So is Senna going to make it into the pits when he competes this lap? He's only halfway around the lap. This is the crossover, the track you see literally above, and there's Mika Hakkinen.
Well, Mika Hakkinen in the pits, so I don't think Senna can come in this lap unless I get him out very quick indeed.
I don't see any reason why he can't come in. There's no reason why Senna can't come in at this lap, Allard. Well, he's in and out.
If Mika didn't stall. So Damon Hill pressing Ayrton Senna again. There we see more speed from the Williams Renault. Ooh, and that's onto the wet part, but he's made it through safely, unlapping himself from the race leader.
As he's going to go into the pits. So now it's going to be a battle in the pit lane, and then the remaining laps all the way to the checkered flag. And McLaren have got to get Senna in and out cleanly. Well, the wet weather tyres, they don't look badly worn. Good stop, 5.61. That was quicker than Prost's stop. And Senna more able, in my opinion, to take advantage of slick tyres in these conditions than Alain Prost would be. Prost certainly was more cautious leaving the pit lane. There's Alain Prost, and that's the difference. Prost just starting pit lane as Senna makes his way up through those tortuous bends behind the pits.
Senna still leads the Grand Prix. Led every lap of this Grand Prix, didn't he?
Still cautious though. You can hear him as he comes through. Alain Prost is not really entirely comfortable, in my view, with the damp patches that are still ebbing into some of the corners.
Well, unless something goes wrong for Ayrton Senna, either mechanically or a driving error, he's going to win this Grand Prix. He's got a 38-second lead over Alain Prost, and I can't see with 10 laps to go that Alain Prost is going to gain 4 seconds a lap.
I think it would be very wishful thinking on the part of Alain Prost that he could do. He certainly would love to do, I know that. But in these very mixed and very difficult conditions, this is the type of thing that Senna revels in. And, you know, this is his penultimate race. Likewise for McLaren. And certainly he wants to end his very, very fruitful career with the Marlboro McLaren team on a high note.
Japan's seen surprise winners, and there's Brazilian flags. We've had Gerhard Berger win here, and that's the end of Gerhard Berger's race. We've seen Senna win here in 88, Nannini 89, Piquet in 90, Berger again in 91, and Riccardo Patrese last year. So we've seen surprise winners in quite a few Grand Prix, and well, Ayrton Senna.
Well, disgust on the face of Gerhard Berger. He's come all this way, in and out of the pits 3 times, and somebody there creeping very slowly on the exit from the hairpin bend. And Gerhard, well, he's had the most appalling year. And Jean Todt and Jean Alesi, he was in early retirement after a very unfortunate start. And there we see he just pulled off, and that's the end of that for Gerhard Berger.
Went through a big puddle. I think that's where most of the steam's coming from.
It certainly was a deep puddle, and Berger sitting now. Race not long to run.
Another good year for Ferrari, although Alesi's 15-lap lead at the start of the Portuguese Grand Prix was something of a fillip for them.
Rubens Barrichello is in 5th position. So there we see the top 6. Barrichello 5th, Irvine 7th, Hill 4th, and the top 3 still the same. And Derek Warwick again in a point scoring position, which is exactly what he said after qualifying. Well, we look at the position 7 to 12. Derek said, well, we're half qualified. I'm in a potential point scoring position. We just see how much luck turns my way during the race.
Well, that 6th place is a fair 6th place. He started 7th on the grid, and to be 6th, he should be very happy indeed.
The only one who dropped out really in front of Derek Warwick is Gerhard Berger, and I think we can also say that he overtook Berger fair and square before Gerhard retired.
Indeed, and Mika Häkkinen really had a very lonely race here in Japan. And after his dynamic debut in Estoril 1 month ago, he followed it up with equally dynamic performances in qualifying. But I think he decided that this is a race that he wanted to finish and finish on the podium in. And that looks very much what he is set to do. There's a long career ahead of Mika Häkkinen at McLaren, and his day will come when he will be on the winner's podium, and in fact it could come even in 2 weeks' time in Australia.
Mika came to Formula 1 straight from Formula 3, won the British Formula 3 Championship, and then went to Lotus. Had a bit of a fraught first Formula 1 race when the steering wheel came off, but then matured into a very good Grand Prix driver, and well, he's had speed. I think everybody knew that even before he got to Formula 1.
Well, I watched him the first day he drove a Lotus at Silverstone, and it was late in a winter afternoon, and he didn't really fit the car. The steering wheel was about the size of a 50-pence piece, and somehow he just heroed that car around, and he's never stopped driving like that. His enthusiasm, his commitment, his heart is literally enormous.
Yeah, but his enthusiasm, John, is still enormous. I mean, the way he talks to me and to you about driving that McLaren, how good it is and how brilliant everything is just genuine enthusiasm.
And that's what makes Mika Häkkinen a pleasure to have in a Formula One paddock, because really, normally all you get is doom and gloom from everybody else. And when you see somebody who is cheerful and positive and gracious, it doesn't have to make your life a lot easier.
Now, if Eddie Irvine could go past Derek Warwick, then he is in 6th position. And I don't know what Eddie Jordan would do tonight if both of his cars finish in the points today.
Well, I know where he would be. He'd be in the old log cabin. That's the famous watering hole here at Suzuka. And because there's not a great deal to do for team members, I don't include drivers in that, of course, but team managers, team bosses, engineers, whatever else, they get in there and they give the old whiskey bottle a fairly good bashing. And some of the tales that emanate the following morning are definitely coloured by hangovers. It's notorious, but it's a lot of fun.
Häkkinen, who will complete his first Grand Prix this year in anger. Of course, he's done numerous Grand Prix distances in testing, but still that's a different Grand Prix than doing a Grand Prix proper.
Certainly is, and of course the pressure of traffic all around you is an entirely different approach. And well, I think Mika's done probably something like a full Grand Prix season away from actual Grand Prix. So certainly when he did get his opportunity in Estoril, he was very much dialed in to the team and to the car, and the speed was there, the stamina, commitment goes without saying.
We're 1 hour and 30 minutes on the way in this Grand Prix. We've got 7 laps to go. So it'll be a slower Grand Prix than last year, but that's due to the rain we've had during this race. Mika, who's got a 40-second lead over Damon Hill, so he hasn't really got to worry about Damon. And behind Damon Hill, 11 seconds to Rubens Barrichello, and then it's Derek Warwick and Eddie Irvine, 1 lap behind race leader Ayrton Senna.
You know, looking at Damon, really, I mean, great disappointment, I'm sure, for him in 4th place. And it all goes back to qualifying, where on Friday he went off and then didn't happen for him on Saturday. Started on the 3rd row of the grid. He got badly boxed in at the start, and really it's all gone from that point.
Because this race historically has a pretty high attrition rate. Bit of a flick there from Herbert, trying very hard there behind Lamy. But of course at this stage with some...
Pedro Lamy leads Johnny Herbert. They're both 2 laps behind Ayrton Senna. And Lamy, who's still waiting to finish his first Grand Prix.
Well, Allard, if he bumps over curves like that, he could jeopardize that dream, because attacking a curb hard like that is not the best way in my view. And certainly, again, the conditions are not absolutely dry all the way around, and it probably pays just to stay off them as much as you can. This man certainly knows how to do that, Alain Prost. Some 31 seconds now in arrears from race leader Ayrton Senna. And this is just 6 more points for Alain Prost. It's no end. Oh, and a big shunt. Riccardo Patrese has gone off somewhere very heavily indeed. You see the entire left side of the car wiped out, the rear wing. And that looks like a bit of bruising in the legs for Riccardo Patrese. connecting the radio to the that's in the car, and that is unfortunate.
Riccardo Patrese, last year's race winner, and there's still a lot of talk about this man next year. Michael Schumacher likes to keep him in the Benetton team. Also,
I bet he does. I mean, who wouldn't like to keep a driver in the team that isn't going to be a challenge to you and makes you the number one, the unquestioned number one driver in the team?
But also there's talk that Riccardo Patrese will go and do the German Touring Car Series for Alfa Romeo.
I think that Benetton in many ways, by keeping Patrese, is not a bad move. In fact, I mean, it's slightly cynical to say that it would suit Michael Schumacher very well. But when you've got a good partnership between two drivers, it's worth an awful lot. You put two drivers together who are in direct competition, then you can sometimes find it difficult to control, and it can sometimes be destructive to the team. But the options are not very great right now. There's nobody obvious that Benetton appear to be chasing. And it may be that some of the new people like Eddie Irvine or Jos Verstappen, who was so outstanding in testing at Estoril, could find themselves being the centre of attention from a team like Benetton. Another name, of course, that's been mentioned is Luca Badoer.
Yeah, I was just going to say that.
And Badoer spent a couple of days again testing recently at Silverstone. Did quite a lot of miles, managed to spin 2 or 3 times, but finally put together a reasonable run of laps. And I suppose if any of the young drivers were likely to be chosen, he would probably be fairly high on that list. And there we see, that's where Patrese went off. That was that long final left-hand corner after the sequence of S-bends. It's a very fast corner, and the impact was pretty big.
Rubens Barrichello's 15th Grand Prix, and this could be the first time he's going to score points. He's in 5th position, and he's got 4.5 laps to go. And John, if we go just quickly to race leader Ayrton Senna, his 157th Grand Prix and his 40th victory.
Getting very, it's almost 4-1. It's a pretty good average, and
more than 4-1.
It's well, one wonders what may happen next year. And Alain Prost's tally of World Championship victories was considered years ago to be, well, just impossible. And Senna's had a lean year over the past 2 years by his standards. He's looking forward to 1994, I believe, with great anticipation. And there's the battle going on behind with Derek Warwick and Eddie Irvine, and let's hope that rear camera remains on that battle. But certainly Warwick and Irvine nose to tail.
Race leader Ayrton Senna in the foreground. In the background and a little left of this camera shot is Eddie Irvine trying to take 6th position away with 4 laps to go from Derek Warwick. This is experience and youth?
It's both. It's experience and youth. It's experience from Derek Warwick from being in Grand Prix racing from 1981. It's experience of Suzuka from Eddie Irvine, who's raced here for 3 years in Formula 3000. Knows the place probably better than any racetrack outside of Kirkiston in Northern Ireland. And with only a few laps remaining, well, can Eddie Irvine throw caution to the wind, get close enough to Derek Warwick, and be audacious enough to try and nick that final 1 point in Japan?
Well, to score a point on your Grand Prix debut, and also the first points for a very long time for the Jordan team, nearly a year ago.
Yes, it was here, in fact. No, it wasn't. It was in Australia last year. They almost had a point here last year with Stefano Modena, but they finally got it in Australia. And you see Irvine very close to Warwick as they come onto the straight, but the power of that Mugen engine, I think, is going to be too great for the Hart V10. But Eddie Irvine stuck under the rear wing, and he's courageous. The boy is prepared to take a chance, and it's going to be coming down into the chicane if it's going to be anywhere.
Well, Did the car stop? Yes, something's happened behind Ayrton Senna. We could hear the engine rev suddenly go up. What has happened? Warwick's off.
And Warwick is going to be absolutely furious. We don't know where Eddie Irvine is, but certainly there was. And he's walking over to Eddie Irvine, I suspect. We saw this happen. Oh, maybe he's just running to get out of the way.
Irvine's cross-start finish, John. So Eddie Irvine has taken 6th place in an exuberant move.
Well, we're going to have to see what the stewards say about it, whether it was a fair overtake or whether it was unfair. Certainly Warwick's car is, you can see, and I suspected Irvine did take a lunge down the inside. There we see it. Well, both of them punted fair and square up the back by Irvine's. The nose of the Jordan made contact with the gearbox of Derek Warwick's footwork, and that is a sad way to see a battle for the last point being decided.
3 laps to go for race leader Ayrton Senna, who is still 30 seconds ahead of Alain Prost, who is 12 seconds ahead of Mika Häkkinen, and then it is Damon Hill in 4th, and in 5th, oh, the Irish, Martin Brundle, fastest lap. Well, they put the wheel back on his car, and Martin shows everybody here that he is a quick racing driver, and if that stays like that, it would be Martin's very first fastest lap during a Formula 1 Grand Prix.
Well, after all the traumas and battles he's been through in the last week, it certainly will be, well, a little reward. And there we see Mika Häkkinen now some 13 seconds behind Alain Prost, still trying as hard as ever. And where Alain Prost might be deciding, well, I'll just back off that little bit, Mika Häkkinen has never had the thought. In fact, Mika Häkkinen is closing down pretty quickly. I would say when they come across start-finish line, that gap is less than 13 seconds. It's too big, in my opinion, for Häkkinen to really be in a position to do anything about, but Alan is being, let's say, very cautious indeed in these remaining laps.
Oh,
big shunt for Johnny Herbert.
Big shunt for Pedro Lamy.
Oh, Pedro Lamy, yes. And that is an oil fire, fuel fire. Oil lines, hydraulic lines have been ruptured in that shunt, and just goes to show that the circuit still can catch out the unwary. And Pedro Lamy limping from that accident. Well, he was battling long and hard with teammate Johnny Herbert, and I did mention that Lamy was putting wheels over curbs, and something that he shouldn't do. Oh, and there we see it. That wasn't. Oh, what a heavy impact. That was high speed. Same place Ricardo Patrese went off. Well, very, very lucky indeed that Pedro Lamy hit that the way he did, sideways on. All the impact, of course, was absorbed in the wheel and suspension.
Well, Ayrton Senna starting his last lap. It's Eddie Irvine who's gaining again on Ayrton Senna. Yes, hello Ayrton.
Senna, don't do that. I think that's always an error in a driver's park when on the last lap he takes the hand out of the cockpit and waves to the adoring thousands, and there are plenty of them here in Japan that do love Ayrton Senna. But Eddie Irvine's right on your gearbox, and that's not the place you want to have Eddie Irvine. Having seen what, or witnessed what took place with Derek Warwick, well, Eddie's backed off.
But, John, if we can sum this race up so far, that the man riding behind Ayrton Senna, Eddie Irvine, is the star of the weekend.
He has done a truly remarkable job, and there will be joy in every form for the Jordan team. It's been a hard year, and it was only in Estoril where they introduced a long wheelbase version of this car that they began to see some more promise, and then further testing, and Eddie Irvine pulling up alongside race leader. Eddie, you're going to have to do an extra lap. But the guy is 100% race driver.
Ayrton Senna waving at the crowd. One more chicane to go. He is very happy with this victory indeed. Very happy Ayrton Senna, scoring his 40th Grand Prix victory, and the Japanese Brazilians go wild. It's his second Japanese Grand Prix victory. There's Alain Prost. He finishes in second position, but this man, he wanted that this weekend.
And he's got his seatbelts undone. He's looking around the circuit. He's waiting for one of those legions of fans to rush up to him with the Brazilian flag. Mika Häkkinen, podium position. Very good drive indeed from Mika Häkkinen. Did all that was required of him. More points for McLaren team. The first points of the year for Mika. Look, beckoning to somebody. Bring me my flag. I want it now. And well, I don't know whether the stewards are going to allow the fan with the flag to get to Senna. Obviously not. And Senna now continuing around. He'll find a flag somewhere. He always does. He always manages it somewhere. Well, what a Grand Prix. We anticipated an exciting Grand Prix, largely on what we had seen from qualifying. It didn't materialize in the early laps, but certainly once the rain came, we got an excellent Grand Prix. Disappointment for the Williams team. They, by rights, ought to have won it. Alain Prost and Damon Hill will feel, I would think, very disappointed indeed. But that's Grand Prix racing. They don't all come in fair and fine weather. It would be a mistake, though, I have to say that this victory wasn't due entirely to the weather. Senna took the lead. He was controlling the race at the front, and I don't know whether Alain Prost would have had the legs to have done anything with Senna this afternoon.
There's two happy men there. Mika scoring his best ever Grand Prix result. Yes.
Well, a little bit of exuberance, and understandably so. And well, there's going to be a few rowdy celebrations tonight in the log cabin. It's the one place that Ayrton Senna does appear to allow himself to taste alcohol, and I'm sure he will do more than that this evening. Mika Häkkinen might be tempted. Ron Dennis undoubtedly will be. He'll probably be doing the bang, and certainly Eddie Jordan will be right in behind Ron Dennis, paying his share of the rounds as well.
So we've had three teams in the top six today: McLaren, Williams and Jordan. Rubens and Eddie doing a good job, a brilliant job in 5th and 6th position. Ayrton Senna wins, then it's Alain Prost, Mika Häkkinen, Damon Hill, Rubens Barrichello, Eddie Irvine, Mark Blundell 7th, JJ Lehto 8th, Pierluigi Martini 9th, 10th Johnny Herbert, 9th Johnny Herbert, 10th Toshio Suzuki. Actually, Toshio Suzuki is 12th, and I have to look at the right page on the computer because, of course, I shouldn't forget Martin Brundle in 9th position. Pierluigi Martini 10th, Herbert 11th, and Suzuki 12th. Well, he hasn't found his flag yet.
Well, security is very strict at Suzuka, and well, I'm surprised that Senna has not been able to grab hold of his beloved Brazilian flag, but circuits have had to increase the security. We've seen over previous years where fans have been running not just to the track edge but actually across the track, and there is very, very high security fencing. You see it here. It is like that all around the circuit, and well, I think what Senna had hoped was that somebody might throw a flag across to a marshal. The marshal may then bring it to Senna, but the message didn't get across.
Well, you know how expensive the flags are in Japan.
Well, I think anybody would be delighted to let their flag go to Ayrton Senna. And Mika Häkkinen now coming down into the Parc Fermé, where the top 6 cars will be taken, and they will be then scrutineered to ensure their eligibility. And there will be an expression of delight on Senna's face when that very famous helmet, and there are many replicas of it in Japan, is removed.
So fastest lap is eventually gone to Alain Prost, to 1:41.176 on lap 53.
And look, great gesture. 2 men, been a wonderful partnership. They've had their ups and downs, they've had their arguments, they battled like a pair of weasels all through the winter. But the one thing that Ron Dennis does, and the one thing that Ayrton Senna does, is they deliver. And look at Mika.
He looks pretty fresh.
Very fresh indeed. And there's the future. That is the future for McLaren. And, well, Ayrton looking pretty cool and pretty happy with himself. And after Ron Dennis, well, it's probably known by most people now, but Ron Dennis was here over the weekend. His weekend started badly because he was out in his McLaren F1 road car and he slipped off the track somewhere and did a little bit of light damage to it. Well, there were a few red faces, notably Ron's, but this afternoon makes up for it, and that car will be very shortly back in Japan to be demonstrated to potential customers, and then on to the Australian Grand Prix, where the same process is going to take place.
It's the best McLaren result for a long time, when their drivers finished in 1st and 3rd position. Alain Prost and Damon Hill 2nd and 4th for McLaren, and then it's Rubens Barrichello and Eddie Irvine 5th and 6th for Jordan. 7th Mark Blundell, 8th JJ Leto, 9th Martin Brundle, 10th Pierluigi Martini, and rounding off the runners are Herbert, Suzuki, Lamy and Warwick, but they were not running at the end of the race. And just listen to the crowd, they love this man.
I can't think of a more popular result than Ayrton Senna here in Suzuka. Obviously Aguri Suzuki would have been somebody they would have gone berserk about, but not to be.
Well, there we see the prize givens, and well, that's a big trophy.
Yep, and that'll be on the shelves of McLaren cars in Woking very soon indeed. All the trophies belong to the company, and that will join many hundreds of others, some of which have come from the Japanese Grand Prix.
And of course, for Ron Dennis, the winning constructor, and Alain Prost, a smile on his face, but I suppose he now wants to win Australia very desperately indeed.
Well, Australia's got to be very much a favourite circuit for Williams and Renault. Again, it is a power circuit. That very long straight will suit Prost, the Williams, the Renault 100%. But then so should Suzuka. And
mind you, Prost lost a whole Friday morning.
Yes, he did, and of course that did undoubtedly result in last ground. But he did have pole position, and he failed to make best use of it. He let Senna take the initiative. But maybe Alan wasn't quite so committed in this Grand Prix. He certainly would want to avoid a repeat of what took place 3 years ago.
So the driver standings here, 93 points for Alain Prost. Damon Hill still second. Ayrton Senna now within 2 points. And then it is Michael Schumacher who did not score today. But first points of the season for Mika Häkkinen, which is his best result. And with the Constructors' Championship, it is Williams, Renault, McLaren, Ford now moving ahead of Benetton again. Well, that is joint 10th. The Jordan Grand Prix joint 10th position for
tremendous difficult season for us, not only for me but for the team. And like the other 3 victories, you know, this one is special because it's in a place where we have great memories of championship victories, race victories, a huge number of fans cheering up for us, lots of Brazilian flags around. And right at the end of a championship, at the end of the season, when still there is an open situation for a second place. And the fact also that I'm leaving the team at the end of the year, it's just great opportunity that we collect today with the changeable conditions. Very difficult to maintain your pace and stay on the circuit. And this victory is really the best I could offer to the team who gave me 3 World Championships.
Well, you mentioned your team, McLaren Ford. This is today their 103rd victory, which equals Ferrari's record, and I'm sure you must feel very proud to be part of that.
Yeah, I think it's a great record that the team has achieved, and I am very happy that I have contributed a little bit for that. At the same time that Mika has done extremely well, and for the team to be 1 and 3rd, 1st and 3rd here, it's a tremendous result, and I think it's a very good start for him and a very good way to finish for me.
In the race between laps 34 and 38, you lost a considerable time advantage over Alain. The track appeared to be drying rapidly. Were you not worried that you should be changing tyres earlier than you in actual fact did?
Well, yes, normally I should, but I didn't have to, and I didn't want to change tyres too early and take a risk, and maybe with the slicks in very difficult conditions, risk to go off. So with the lead that I had, I only had to pace myself and wait for a safe moment for change tires. I had lots of scary moments in the race with back markers, just very unprofessional. I mean, if you're leading the race, the guy makes life so difficult for you to overtake, 2, 3, 5 laps, and then when you overtake and they get involved ahead of you, other guys make a mistake, and you slow down, the guys come behind you, hitting you, going like banging wheels with you, and I'm leading the race, I'm lapping the guy. So very unprofessional, and I think a measure should be taken against the drivers who did that. And secondly, I had 3 guys fighting in front of me, had nowhere to go, then Patrese spun in front of me, I had to go off the circuit in the chicane to avoid him. Again, a result of the people being not professional. And later on, Ligier car lost a wheel on the straight and dropped a big piece of metal, and he was ahead of me, so I couldn't see very well. When I suddenly realized I hit that big piece of metal in my left front suspension, and there was some damage there. I don't know exactly how much, but there was some damage. And lots of other moments, you know, just people spinning all over the place, dropping oil. Very difficult race, but I think exactly being that difficult, it gave us the opportunity to create a little bit of, and use a little bit of instinct and get the victory.
Well, I think every driver had a tell-to-tale today, but Alain, the Japanese Grand Prix has always been elusive for you. It remains so, and with your retirement, you don't look like you're going to win this one again. I'm sure you must have hoped for a victory today.
Yes, for sure. I mean, every time I start a race, I hope to win it, but I knew it would be very difficult, and it was like this, difficult because the competition was higher than it was at the beginning of the season. We saw in qualifying that a lot of cars were very close together, and difficult also because of the condition. And I mean, nothing to say. You know, in this kind of race, as Ayrton said, there's a lot of things happening, and I can't complain very much. I did a good start, but too much wheel speed, and Ayrton started first. And the only way I could win the race without the rain was to stop only once if he was stopping twice, and so we don't know if it could be good or not, because the rain came and we had all sorts of problems. I went off. I was quite lucky to go back on the track. Went off on the oil, and quite pleased with the second place.
Mika, your first visit to the podium in your career, second race for McLaren this year. You must be on a high.
Yeah, it feels good. It feels really nice, you know. But it's only a few minutes now from the race, and a lot of things going in your mind.
What point?
Still, I'm not going to tell you what happened in the race, and at the moment it just feels good.
Actually, it was quite a quiet race for you, was it not? There was one point where you were very close to Alain in the wet.
I have to admit, I was following a lot about the pit board, about my lap times and the distance for the person who is in front of me and same who's behind me. And I wasn't pushing at all, because this is basically the second Grand Prix for me this year. And for me it was, when I see the position 3, it was enough for me in this point. And it wasn't point to push too hard and take a risk.
Well, looking ahead, if we may, 2 weeks, the Australian Grand Prix, the final round of the World Championship. There's still a lot at stake. Ayrton, you can still take second place in the championship. Alain, I'm sure you'd like to go out with a race victory. And Mika, with the improvement in McLaren's form, I'm sure you'd like to do the same. Ayrton, what are the chances?
We'll wait and see.
Expecting to have some holidays next week, and then long holidays after Australia, but if I can finish with a win, I would be very, very happy. Yeah.
Mika?
I think I have to say same what Ayrton said.